Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome back to another Accidentally Intentional podcast episode. Now, before you clicked into this and are hesitating, thinking, I don't know if this is for me, the reason that I believe this conversation is for everybody today is because if you are currently not grieving a loss of somebody that you care about, you know somebody that is grieving. And this is going to be a transformative conversation for both parties. And so I am honored to have joining us today Sherrie Dunlevy. And she is a grief coach, an international speaker, and she is not only an author of the book, How Can I Help, which you'll see behind her if you're watching on YouTube. And it's a guide that helps people who are walking alongside someone going through grief. But not only that, she is also the founder of the Graduating Grief Academy and has a podcast called Graduating Grief as well. So her biggest passion is to help people through the grieving process. So Sherrie, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and you know what? I'm really excited to reach an audience your age, because I think it's really important. All of us know someone who's going through a tough time,
Hmm.
and grief is associated mostly with death, but
Hmm.
we are grieving all kinds of things that we might not consider it being grief. And so, just knowing that can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I admittedly am someone who would say is not good at walking alongside people who are grieving. I just don't know what to say. It's uncomfortable. It feels awkward. And I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I unfortunately always err towards the side of saying nothing at all. So there's a ton I want to get into, but I think a great starting point would be how on earth did you get passionate about grief? Because I don't really know a lot of people out here saying, something that I love to talk about, grief. So I'd love to kind of hear what made this set your heart on fire.
I don't really love to talk about grief, but I feel that I am able to talk about grief, and it's important to talk about grief, and I don't shy away from it.
Mm,
And so I feel like because so few people do talk about it, and I have the
mm,
skills, talents, and abilities and gifts that God gave me, that I feel like He's calling me into this work. Now,
mm,
that being said, I don't feel that I am really talking about the darkness of grief. Rather, I feel I'm being led to offer hope and healing.
mm.
There's a big difference there
Yeah,
because some
great
people
distinction.
can get attached to that pain and lay and decay in that darkness. And
Mm,
I feel that God has chosen me to say, Sherrie, you've been through this now, and you've gone through on the journey, and you've gotten to the other side, and you still can see that life is beautiful, that life is meaningful, that it is impactful. And
mm,
so it's beautiful, and you can enjoy it and love it again,
mm,
even after
mm,
your worst pain. So what I want you to do is to shine that light on hope and healing, and say, and be kind of like the guide that says,
mm,
people, this way, come this way, come this way. So that's why my husband and I lost our son back in 1999. I was a
mm,
television news anchor at the time. It was a very public loss. And at that same time that we lost our son, my husband and I also lost some of our closest friends at that time.
mm.
And that's what a lot of people will say. They will say when they've had a profound loss in their life, that there are some people they just thought would be there that slipped out the back door and never showed up again for them. And
Mm,
then there are other people that were like angels on earth that came forward that they would have never suspected would have helped them ever.
mhm.
Most times those are people that have been on this journey prior, and they know the
Wow.
importance of helping people through this journey. So when you lose a child, or when you lose someone that you profoundly love, or something that you've profoundly loved, um, a lot of times you feel very isolated and alone, and you feel like you're the only one. So, you know,
Mhm,
we felt like we were initiated into this club of parents who've lost a child,
mm,
but a club we never ever would want to gain admittance to.
Right.
but we were never so thankful to find that there were other members that could help us get through this. So, um, that's a long way of saying that we've lost some of our closest friends. And when I was talking to people through the years, I realized that we weren't alone in that. And it
Mm,
didn't matter whether it was a death, it could be a divorce. People don't know what to say. People don't know what sides to choose. People, it could be a cancer diagnosis where people who have been diagnosed with cancer have told me that they felt as if they were contagious and people had to stay away from them and they were
mm,
profoundly affected and hurt by that. And so that happened to us. I found that it was happening to other people. And 6 years after my son died, one of the people that had abandoned us, just called me out of the blue and said she was thinking of me and wanted to know what I was up to, and made no mention of us losing our child or how we had adjusted or how we had gotten through or how she had just, like I thought she was going to say to me after my son died, "I've got a sitter for the kids. Hold on. I will be up. I'll be there for you." And what I heard
mm,
instead was, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." And I didn't hear from her again. And then 6 years later, I'm on her mind, but she wanted the old Sherrie. And, we just didn't you don't get to do that anymore. So you can really ruin profound relationships by stepping back in fear. And so
wow.
you have to decide what kind of friend you're gonna be, what kind of support system you're going to be. And I know that might be painful because you were saying that, you are one of those people that steps away. Don't
Yeah.
feel condemned, don't feel guilty about that because you can always do better next time, right?
Mm,
So
mhm,
my thought process is on this is it's better to show up awkwardly. It's better to show up and say the wrong stupid thing than to not be there at all.
mm,
Because when you're on our end, there's nothing worse than not only feeling the loss and darkness of your grief, but then it being compounded by the darkness of abandonment.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, so much sense. And I appreciate you sharing so vulnerably and going into that detail because when people think of grief, they think about it just like a snapshot. If they're watching someone go through it, they don't realize the layers of loss that go along with that. So that's really helpful. I guess I want to have you frame up for us in your mind how you would define grief.
I do the Graduating Grief podcast, and there is a grief expert named Dr. Phyllis Kaminsky, and she gave me a definition of grief that I like to use because I
Okay.
find that this is all encompassing, and it's true.
Mm,
Grief is what we feel when we lose something or someone we love dearly. So
mm,
if we use that definition, that could be a job that we lost, a career that we lost. It could be a school year that we lost. It could be the pandemic. The pandemic, it would be safe to say that everyone had grieved something or someone.
sure.
Even if you did
Mhm,
not lose a single soul to death, you lost something. You lost a school
mm,
year, you lost a wedding, you lost a family vacation, you lost a job, a
sure.
marriage, the way you were used to maneuvering in the world. Right
Mhm,
now, I'm working in home health care as a marketing representative. And what I'm finding is there are a lot of our elders who are grieving the loss of their independence,
mm,
grieving the loss of how they were used to living their life.
mm, mhm,
That happens when we're injured. A friend of a neighbor of ours across the street, the boy's in his senior year, and first game of the season, he falls and breaks his leg, and so he lost his whole senior sports season. and he was a contender for scholarship, an athletic scholarship. So,
Mm,
these are all things that we can grieve that people don't realize or describe or identify as they're going through it, the feelings and
mhm,
emotions as grief.
mm. That's a really helpful distinction. My next question along with that, because you're talking about identifying it, is how can someone identify if they are in fact grieving? And I know that we have a lot of misconceptions we have to talk about next, but if someone isn't really sure if they are grieving, and maybe I've heard that grief comes in waves, you know? So it could appear and maybe look like something else. But what is something that you've used to help people understand and identify in themselves that the root of whatever they are experiencing right now is in
Well, grief
fact
can be
grief?
there is no one size fits all. That's the thing.
Okay.
There is no one size fits all. And the people looking in are seeing it as sadness and crying
Mm,
and isolation, uh, depression. Okay. But, you know, someone comes to work, they've got a game face on or a mask on. They're
yeah.
holding it together for work. So they're smiling and they're going through the motions. Then they're getting out to their car and they're doing the crying, right?
Hmm.
So you might
Hmm.
think, well, they're fine. They look fine. They seem fine. So grief can have many faces and many masks because it can be crying, it can be sadness, it can be isolation, it can be anger, it can be
Hmm.
rudeness, it can be brain fog, it can disconnection, um,
Mm,
compassion fatigue. Like, you just don't have like, I had 3 in 2021, I had 3 losses
wow.
and was just formulating the Graduating Grief Academy, just launching it.
Wow.
And it came to a point where it was like, I have no room for any help healing anybody else right now. I have too much on my plate. I lost
Sure.
my dog, I lost my
Mm,
dad, and I lost my best friend. It was like boom, boom, boom. And then
wow.
dealing with the repercussions from then the stressors of my father's death, which was taking care of my mother, and she wanted to move, and the legalities. And sometimes we don't even, like, the first year passes and we feel like I haven't even grieved yet because you're
Mm,
taking care of the business of death. Or cancer
wow.
diagnosis. You're just on your regimen of what you're going to be doing for your treatments, and trying to, hold down your job and get your kids to school and do all these things that you haven't even had time to, like, go, this is what's happening to me. So it can last a long time. It can be delayed. It can be immediate. And then there are some people, especially if you've lived with someone, cared for someone, watched someone disintegrate through dementia or Alzheimer's, that you've been losing them a little bit at a time. So you've been grieving all this time, so that by the time they have died, 3 months later, you might be ready to get back to life. And
Mm,
people are like, what? They just died 3 months ago. How could he be wanting to date again? How could be? So we
mm,
can't judge it because that's called anticipatory grief, and they might have been grieving for 10 years,
wow.
and wanting their life back. So we cannot judge someone else's grief. We cannot compare our grief to anyone else's. I had my aunt tell me, I don't grieve. What's wrong with me? I don't
Mm,
think there's anything wrong with you. It's how you process things. But there is a physicality to grief. There are physical things that actually happen in your body as you're grieving.
mm,
You can't remember things. You have brain fog. It feels like your mind is mud. You
mm,
you you can't make decisions. You lose confidence in decision making. Um, so there's illness. Your immune system is drained and
mm,
compromised, so you can catch every illness that comes down the pike.
wow.
Okay, so those are you can't sleep, sometimes you can't eat. There's just so many
Mm,
physical things. Then there's emotional things that are going on. There's mental things that are going on. So there's just all these things happening. You're trying to process, and your brain's going to work trying to make sense of the senseless. And that's why people
Wow.
have a hard time. It's trying to
Wow.
make sense of the senseless. And so we don't want to accept it. We don't want this to be our life right now. And so we
Yeah.
fight against it and we make ours. And the more we do that, the more we concentrate on the question, why me? Why my son? Why did he have to suffer? Why did it have to be so long? Why did it have to end this way? You're never, ever, ever going to get an answer that's going to be good enough. Oh,
Mm.
okay. Well, then that's good. I'm glad you took him, Lord, right? You're never gonna get an answer that's acceptable enough. So that's why I tell people, why is a circular question that's never ending and you'll never get out of the grief cycle asking why. The
Mm.
question to ask is what now? What do I do
Mm.
now, Lord? Show me what
Mm.
the next step is here. What do I take? What's the next best right step?
Mm. I love
I
that.
can't
That's
change what happened.
yeah.
I don't like what
Yeah.
happened. I hate what happened. But some people are so ingrained, if I can't have my life back as it was, I will never be happy,
Mm.
you know? And I say you're wasting your life,
Mm.
because it would have been very easy for me to sit back and be very angry at God and say, you took my son and I will, but I didn't want to get to the end of my life and God say, Sherry, what'd you do with that 50, 60 years I gave you after Brandon died? Well, what do you
Wow.
think I did? You took my son. I didn't do anything. I'm so mad at you. Oh my gosh. I gave you 60 years of life and that's how you used that gift.
Mm.
I don't want to get there. I want my son lived for 29 days and his life mattered and it made an impact. His life chapter was 29 days. That was a chapter in my life. If
Mm.
his life can make an impact in 29 days, then how was I going to live the rest of my life? What kind of impact would I want to make? Do I want to make a positive impact or a negative impact? Because how we live the rest of our lives, God, we're here for a reason and a purpose. And as long as we have breath and our heart is beating, we can pour into other people.
Mm.
I just want to make my son proud. I don't want to waste my life, this gift that God gave me.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. As you were sharing a couple of those things, I picked up on you talking about going through the grief cycle. And also, you said that it can last a long time. But what I noticed that you didn't say was it will never go away. Can you explain your thoughts on grief? Does grief come to an end? And what does the concept of graduating grief mean?
Does grief come to an end? Well, it depends on who you talk with. If you, on Instagram especially, and what I found in support groups online is there are a lot of people that have a lot of pain.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of people that will feed that pain. And I believe that you can graduate from the pain and suffering of your loss, and you can step back into living and loving your life again so that you can live with purpose and passion and joy.
Mm.
So I believe that's possible, that you can graduate from the pain of your grief. Um, and that's why I didn't believe that before because we are taught
Mm.
grief lasts forever
Hmm.
or time will heal all wounds. And both of those are contradictory. So if grief lasts forever, then time is not going to heal that wound. And there are so many people that are waiting for time to heal the wound that they're sitting around and it's 5 years later, it's 10 years later, and they're not feeling any better. So you can graduate from that pain. You can complete the grief cycle. Grief does not have to define your life and it can come to an end. Now, that doesn't
Mm.
mean that I do not miss my son. It does not mean that I do not miss my father. It does not mean that I still don't shed tears at certain memories. Okay. It does not mean that a wave of grief will come over me.
Mhm.
It means that grief is not in the driver's seat of my life anymore.
Wow.
I have completed the grieving process. And
Mm,
now I'm just a human daughter and a human mother that misses someone they love that aren't here anymore. And there's a big
mm,
difference. But there's a lot of work that you have to do that. And that's what I do is I guide people through that work. It's an 8-week process. But you can complete your grief and then you can reorganize your new life. A life you never chose, but you get to choose now what you're doing. It's almost like you get a do-over. And
mm,
some things fit back into this new life, and some people fit into this new life, and some people don't, and some things don't. Changed my career a year after my son died.
mm,
I realized that that television career was no longer suitable for me.
mm,
So there are a lot of changes and see people want to hold on to the sameness, but it can never be the same. And you can never be the same. You can never be the same.
I love that you can take people through that process in just 8 weeks time, and I know a lot of people are hearing that right now thinking, "That's a dream come true. I need that. I need that because I've been sitting here grieving," which begs my next question. In your mind, what does a healthy grieving process actually look like?
A healthy grieving process to me looks like feeling your feelings first of all, okay? So you have to feel it and then saying I want to feel better again. I don't
Mm,
want to continue to feel this way forever. And if we don't allow those feelings, if we don't, feel, we cannot heal. And so we have to find a way to feel those emotions, to feel what's going on, to come to this acceptance of what's going on. We might not like it, but we have to accept it. It's what happened.
mm,
They're never coming back. We may meet again, but they're never
mm,
coming back. So
yeah.
I help people with that whole process. I help people also process the silly things that people might say to them, and I help people say the things that maybe they didn't get a chance to say,
Mm,
or because some people we always assume that people are grieving because they loved someone so much, but sometimes they're grieving because they've had a horrible relationship with someone. And
mm,
now that person will never change. They'll never have the hope of having that relationship that they wish they had. A mother that loved them or a
yeah.
husband that, loved them or whatnot, right? They never got to say the thing that the dad that left and never came back. Well, now he's dead and he's never coming back. So then that dream has died as well. So you have
Mm,
to come to the realization of some of those things. So sometimes people are grieving things that they wish would have happened in life that
yeah.
never did, and so we have to work through those things as well.
Yeah. Wow. You mentioned people saying some pretty bizarre and crazy things to in their attempt to help someone who's grieving. What are some wrong things to say or do with someone
I
who's
don't
grieving?
say wrong in my book. How can
Okay.
I help? Um, I have helpful and not so helpful. Okay,
Okay.
because
Great
it is
distinction.
you don't know. Like when people would say to me, "Oh, he's in Jesus's arms,"
Mm,
it never offended me. And it just was like, or he's an angel. Um, I like to think of, if he can't be in my arms, Jesus' arms, that's a great place to be. I'd love to have had him in my arms first, though. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying is sometimes we can say these things that even to the most religious person, and I remember one lady, she said, "He's not better off. He's not better off at all. He was better off with me taking care of him. Now he's 6 feet under in the cold ground. He's not better off."
Mm,
She was very angry about that. So that's what I'm saying is people say these things because they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
People say these things because they think they're comforting, okay? And they're awkward at it. It's
Of
like,
course.
imagine, like that first time you had to ask someone on a date or something like it. You're nervous about it, but the more
Right.
you do it, the more you're fine with it. Okay, if they say yes, if they say no, no big deal. You get more comfortable with it. So
Mm.
that's why we're so awkward. We're awkward about because no one wants to talk about death. No one wants to talk about dying. No one wants to talk about grief. And so that's why we're so horrible at it. And that's why I
Mhm.
wrote this book. We're horrible at it. So if I can go back just a little bit, the reason I wrote this was after that girlfriend called me 6 years later. Thank goodness the anger left my heart and curiosity
Wow.
filled it instead. And curiosity was, what was that about? And then I
Mm.
started Googling and going to Amazon and walking into physical bookstores looking for some kind of book like, and I don't, well, I was thinking like, what am I gonna do? Send it to her? This is how you
Mm.
should have helped me. Um, but every time I would look, I would have this calling and it would say, if you want this out there, you can look all you want, but until you write it, it's not gonna happen.
Mm.
And that's why I tell people the difference between a calling and a good idea is the calling never stops. And
Mm.
um, and so that's why I wrote this book because I figured at three, I came down to what's it about? People would either A, don't know what to do or say because it's never been modeled. Um, Two, it's too close to home.
Yeah.
I was of childbearing age. My friends were of all childbearing age. They're all having babies. They're all having they have toddlers at home. And
Mm.
now they know someone whose baby died. And now that means, oh my gosh, it could happen to me. Like it's so frightening. Or it's so frightening to see someone you love so much hurting so much in peril and you don't know what to do. So you can freeze because we are as humans, fight, flight, or freeze. So a lot of us freeze. Um, so it's too close to home. We don't know what to say or do, or we're afraid we're going to do or say the wrong thing. So I think you hit on
Mhm.
all of them, right?
Yeah.
So I always say it's better to step out awkwardly than to not step out at all. So I always tell grievers, these people are doing the best they can. So you can choose to be offended by what they say, or you can just know that this is what they're doing to try to offer you comfort and support. So you get a
Yeah.
choice of how you receive it. So
Wow.
grievers have some responsibility in this too.
Mm.
And so when as to what not to say, some of the things that people say,
Yeah.
go to the visitation. Go to the visitation because grievers will tell me they might not know who all was there, but they know exactly who wasn't. So you think it might not make a big deal because you didn't really know Sherry's
Mm.
dad. So, I'm really not going to go because I really didn't know her dad. But you know Sherry, and it's going to mean something to Sherry. Or I know Sherry's dad, but I don't know anybody else in her family. Go because you've
Mm.
shared a part of that person's life that his family needs to know and hear about. You might have a story of how that person impacted your life um, in some way that they would never know about. And so you're offering them such a gift. So my dad was a welder by trade in the steel mill, and then he retired. So
Mm.
I knew a lot of the steel stories, right? But
Mhm.
after he retired, he became an instructor at a local community college. And so all these young men were coming forward. Your
Mm.
dad changed my life. Your dad gave me such encouragement. I was lost in life and I didn't know what your dad gave me the career that I have today. Things that, I mean, those were golden gifts they gave us, things that I never
Mm.
knew about my dad and the impact that he made. So it does matter. Go to the visitation. Um, don't judge uh, the way someone has a funeral service or doesn't. Don't judge, place your values on someone. Oh, well, they were gay. And so that's not really their husband. I'm not going to go to the visitation. I had one person in my book, her the only dad she ever knew was never married to her mom, and when he
Mm,
died, well, that wasn't your dad, okay? So she got really very little condolences, very little comfort and support from friends, and then
mm.
people were saying to her mom, "Well, he wasn't your husband." So they felt judged, they felt
Yeah.
alone, and they felt very hurt.
Mm,
So sometimes we pass our judgment on in those instances. And one of the things that I think all of us have said and still say, and I have to stop myself. If there's anything I can do, let me know.
mm,
If there's
mhm.
anything I can do for you, let me know. Uh, I always would say that because I meant it until I
Yeah.
lost my son. And then I realized I don't even know what day of the week it is. And you want me to give you an assignment? I'm not doing that. I don't know what I want. And then I was thinking about, the older generation and, the widow, and she takes care of the inside of the house, and he always took care of the outside of the house. And she doesn't know that the lawn needs mowed until she goes outside 3 weeks later and the grass is this high, or he doesn't know that he needs clothes laundered until he runs out of underwear, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
there are things that, like people don't know what they need right now, right away. So
Mhm.
I always say, and when I've spoken to many audiences, there are many people who say, well, that's just something people say so they don't do anything. Like, that's just lip service.
Mm,
And then that made me feel bad because I have said that because I truly meant it.
mhm, mhm.
So, a better way to say that phrase is to offer 3 things you're willing to do. Can I go to the grocery store for you? Do you need someone to take the pets for a walk? Do you need anyone to make phone calls for you? Can I come over and mow the grass? Can I bring dinner over for you? Something you're
Mm,
willing to do. Offer. Give them a choice, 2 or 3 things of things you're
yeah.
willing to do. And if they say no, say, "That's okay. I'm gonna call you back in 2 or 3 weeks, see if you need anything then." And then you can offer the same things, but by then they might go, "Oh my god, you know what? The leaves, they need raked. I never even realized this. The snow, I can't get my car out of the driveway." You know?
Wow. Yeah.
They might say that, but you might also offer that kind of service. But what I'm saying is do something that you're willing to do. Don't offer something you're not willing to do, because
Yeah.
if they do have the courage to ask you and you don't follow through, that is very damaging. It is
Mm,
very
mhm.
hurtful.
That is so helpful. And I think there's a couple things that I picked up on that I think was so helpful is even just talking about follow up in 2 to 3 weeks, which is after the wave of condolences are over. And now they're
Mhm.
settling into their new reality. So I think that's so helpful. And thank you for giving us a new language and a new way to be able to come alongside people. And something else I wanted to touch on was you hearing these stories um, about your father. And I'm thinking of so many people that are afraid to talk about stories and memories because they actually think that's going to be harmful. They don't want to be reminded of that. What would you say to people that have that thought process?
Say their name. Tell the
Mm,
stories. They're not gonna hear them any longer, right? Those are gifts,
mm,
and everyone's afraid, "I'm gonna make it worse, I'm gonna make them cry." They're
yeah.
crying anyhow, they're upset anyhow, and those tears, those memories, those are healing.
Mm,
Tears are healing, and we tell our stories as we grieve, and that helps us heal. So, yes, tell those stories. They will want to hear them. Say, "I have a story I would love to tell you about your dad. If you wanna hear it, I would love to share it with you." Or
mm,
write it in a card, or send a picture, or send a message on Messenger or whatever,
yeah.
anything that can give them a piece of that person back, and especially a
Mm,
piece that they didn't know. is honestly, it's truly a gift. It's truly a
Wow.
gift.
That's so freeing hearing that, because knowing that sharing an experience with someone in that way is actually comforting to them. I feel like just unlocks another layer of empathy for people on the other side. So thank you for helping me understand that.
Sure, and the thing is that that's what people, like, this is what I do a training around the holidays all the time to help
Mm,
people get through the holidays as they're grieving, and I always tell grievers, "You be the one to bring up their name," because that lifts the lid of permission. If you say their name, that's gonna allow other people to say their
mm,
name too, and let them know that it's okay to mention Joe, it's okay to mention Brandon, it's okay.
yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you're not gonna cry. It doesn't mean that you're not sad that they're not here, but that's how you still keep their memory alive. And, no one's gonna say my son's name. So,
Mm,
I wanna say his name. I wanna say Brandon, I'm not gonna hear that name. So if someone says it, that's a gift. It's a gift.
mm,
We're I do what I do, uh, you know, Brandon's life continues to make an impact because I continue to talk about him and introduce him to people. And
mhm,
so, his life is still impacting people today. And he never left the neonatal intensive care unit back in
mm,
1999. So, you know, this is a gift that keeps on giving. Our people matter, lives matter,
yeah.
people matter. They don't disappear just because
Mhm,
they've died.
mm. Wow. Wow. That's beautiful. I also just want to say right here that I'm so grateful for Brandon, because look at how many lives he has impacted
I hope
for
so. I hope
so many
so.
years. I mean,
Yeah.
even just this conversation alone has greatly helped me. Um, this is an interesting question, but you brought up this example of someone who has been grieving for so long while the person was alive. For instance, Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
being part of it, and then being able to, quote, like, bounce back 3 months later. What does it look like to know that grief does not have a hold on you any longer? What are some markers of I am in a really healthy spot now?
I can say their name without bursting out in tears.
Mm,
I have a quiz actually at graduatinggrief.com/quiz. And it's
great.
how do you know that you're ready to graduate from your grief? You are
Mm,
starting to look forward to things in life. You have hopes, dreams, and plans again.
mm,
Um, you are seeking out support. You want to enjoy life. A lot of times what happens is there are people who want to enjoy life, but they feel like everybody's looking at me. Like the first time that I laughed after my son
mm,
died. Oh my God, what kind of mother would that be that is laughing? Her son died. For
mm,
God's sakes, why is she laughing? So we feel like we're under this microscope that people are looking at us and judging us and telling us what, and I don't know who they are, right?
right.
But uh it just means that you want to live. The whole idea behind graduating grief actually came when I was in a support group. And after, like, uh, I went in because I wanted to start feeling better. And I found this community and they helped me navigate through the first Christmas without your child and the anniversary dates, the first Mother's Day, Father's Day. All those things were so helpful and so wonderful. The
Mm,
problem is when I came in and my husband came into the group, we started to progress. But then more new people were coming in and then their pain. And then we would have to tell our story again. And it got to the point
mm,
where I wanted someone to tell me now how to live and start feeling better. And there was no beginning, there was no end. It was like this perpetual group. New people were constantly coming in, but there was no way to cycle out. And I one day I said to my husband, "I don't want to go back." And he said, "Why? They're lovely people." I said, "They are lovely people. I needed to graduate, but I still needed
Mm,
some support. I needed to graduate, but I still needed someone to help me step back into what life was going to look like now."
mm,
And to deal with the guilt that you're having and the fear that you're having and all the other ancillary things that surround you as you're grieving and trying to start this new life. So when I'm looking back, that's the feeling that I have, is ready to graduate. So that's why I say graduating grief,
mm,
um, and stepping into this life. And we're here to support you as you do that.
mm,
And so, and the funny thing is that that was very at the beginning of, I left the group, but I created what I needed. I didn't have that support. And so I just
mm,
thought, well, this is as good as it's going to get. So I described my life as living in deep grief and darkness. And then when I thought I had gotten through, when I had left the support group, life, I was living life, but I was living life through a lens of sepia tones.
mm.
And then I found a grief coach who walked me through this grief completion. And now life is in living color again.
Wow.
That's the best way I guess I could describe it. And so I think there are a lot of people that are living in sepia tones, just like I was. I lived in sepia tone for 13 years. I didn't
Mm,
get I didn't, it was 13 years after my son died that I went through this process.
wow.
And that was 10, 11 years ago, something like that. So that's why I'm so passionate about it is, oh my gosh, it can get so much better. And no one
Mm,
knows that it can. Very
mm.
few people know that it can. And I want to be the messenger that yes, yes, you can have your life back. And that's why, so I guess that answers your first question. That's why I'm so passionate about it.
I I love that, and I'm floored because I can just hear people literally exhaling just like that after hearing this conversation, knowing that it doesn't need to stay this way.
No,
And
but you have to choose it.
mm,
We have a decision to make and we have a choice. And a lot of people don't realize that we have that choice.
mm,
So you have to know that this exists and then you have to choose it. And the sad thing is there are a lot of people that won't. And that's, I think, this the part that breaks my heart the most.
yeah, yeah. But the great news is that we're going to help that choice because in the description below, I'm going to have the links to not only the quiz, but also the How Can I Help book and the 8-week course so that you know
Mm.
that there are resources, there are tools, and there are people out here that want to come alongside you into this healing journey. Um, Sherrie, thank you for everything that you shared. This has been so impactful. And I wanted to ask one, where can people find you? And then also anything else that we didn't cover that you would love to share.
Well, yeah, sherriedunlevy.com. That's where you can go to find out about my speaking, my courses, my workshops, things like that. Because I'm an inspiration. I call myself an inspirationista. I want to inspire people to live their best lives, no matter what
Wow.
their past were. So that's,
Yeah.
and then I had the graduating grief because I realized that grief can hold you back from living
Mm,
in that way.
mm,
So it's like, so if you want to find out about my course, my workshop, my courses, and or inviting me to speak, you go to sherriedunlevy.com. If you want great grief resources and blogs and links to the podcast and to find out about the Graduating Grief Academy, go to graduatinggrief.com. But if you want a positive grief support group, go to Graduating Grief on Facebook. And what do I mean by
mm,
positive support group? Remember I was telling you people they everybody brings their pain. Well, we allow you to bring your pain to our group. But what we don't allow you to do is feed the pain.
mm.
You have to feed hope and healing. So, for example, you would come into the group and you would say, I just lost my dog. I don't know, I feel so horrible. Like it's the worst pain I've ever had. No one seems to understand me. And then, you know, you go on to some of these other groups and they will attack you because you lost your dog, and that's not a human, and you can't compare that kind of grief. And these people become angry, and it's pain upon pain upon pain.
Mm,
We don't allow that.
yeah.
If you come in with your pain, we're going to say to you, "You know what? I'm so sorry that you lost your dog. When I lost mine, I was devastated.
Mm,
I'm so sorry. I did this and this really helped me. Why don't you try this and see if this will help you?" We support each other. We can empathize and we can love on one another, but we are always going to uplift and always point people in the direction of hope and healing. We are going to, if you have fallen, there is going to be some kind of hand that's outstretched, ready to pick you back up. That's what
I
my
love
group
that.
is.
I love
So
that.
it's different. It's different because a lot of anger does come with grief. And a lot of times when you're angry, that kind of approach can make you angrier. But that just means that you're
Sure.
not ready for this. And that's okay.
Mhm.
Um, but make no mistake about it, we are always going to try to lift you up and point you back towards the light. Always. And then
Beautiful.
Graduating Grief, or How Can I Help You, can get on Amazon, or you can get it at sherriedunlevy.com.
I love that. And Dr. John Deloney, who is also a guest on this podcast, he always says the quote, grief demands a witness. And everything you're saying today points back to this is you are worth healing. You are worth having incredible relationships as you go through this. And you are not meant to do life alone. And that has become abundantly clear after this
Mhm.
conversation today. So, Sherrie, thank you so much for the gift of your experience and your vulnerability and your heart and your time, because we're so much better because of what you shared with us today.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.